Here's a true story about Randall and why he never trusted his own wife. The first rule Randall ever learned was, don't trust them. This wasn't a lesson taught in a classroom, but one forged in the cruel fires of experience. He didn't trust the kids on the playground who called him a freak for arranging his toys in perfect lines. He didn't trust the teachers who saw his quiet intensity not as focus, but as defiance, labeling him a problem. And now, as a grown man, he didn't trust the sound of his own wife's key turning in the door. Every time he heard that familiar metallic click, the same cold voice would whisper in the back of his mind, "Here it comes." The moment she finally sees the damage. The moment she realizes you're broken. That sound, her coming home, should have been a comfort, a signal that the day was over. But for Randall, it was the start of a test. It finally shattered on a Tuesday. The door opened, and there she was, his wife, illuminating the doorway with her presence. "Hey you," she said, her voice a warm melody that always seemed just slightly out of tune with the discordant noise in his head. She dropped her work bags by the door with a familiar thud and crossed the room to kiss him. Randall met her lips, but his body remained unyielding, a statue carved from tension, pretending to be a man at ease. While his body was still, his mind was a frantic detective, scanning every detail of her return for clues. Why is she smiling that much? Is it genuine, or a mask to hide her disappointment from the day? Is she looking at the unfolded laundry? "How was your day?" she asked, the simple question landing not as an inquiry, but as an accusation. What information was she really trying to extract? Was this a test of his productivity? A gentle probe to see if he'd been spiraling into one of his silent, anxious states? Every simple, loving gesture she made felt like a strategic move in a complex chess game he could never comprehend. He ached to pull her close, to let his armor fall and melt into her warmth, but instinct took over. Instead, he built a wall, an invisible barrier constructed from 1,000 tiny suspicions, each one a brick molded from a lifetime of hurt. He offered a one-word answer, a verbal shrug. "Fine." The wall grew another inch higher. She sighed, a small, almost inaudible puff of air, but to Randall's hyper-attuned senses, it was a blaring siren. It was the sound of her disappointment solidifying, the sound of her love for him eroding, particle by microscopic particle. She could feel the wall, he knew she could, even if she couldn't see its bricks or mortar. And the most twisted part of it all? Randall was the architect of this prison, yet he was also its sole inmate, rattling the bars and desperate for the very connection he was so methodically sabotaging. This wall didn't just appear out of nowhere. The blueprints were drafted decades ago, on the harsh asphalt of playgrounds and under the sterile hum of classroom lights. Randall didn't have the word for it then, but he was autistic. To the other children, he was simply weird. He couldn't grasp the fluid, unwritten rules of their games, the rapid-fire banter, the shifting social hierarchies that decided who was in and who was out. His attempts to join were clumsy, his words too literal, his sincerity misinterpreted as strangeness. They branded him with names that stuck: robot, freak, psycho. For Randall, bullying wasn't a series of events. It was the very atmosphere he breathed. The adults in his world were no better. They saw his struggles not as a sign of a fundamentally different wiring, but as a deep-seated flaw in his character. Teachers labeled him a problem student because he couldn't sit still when the fluorescent lights buzzed like angry hornets, or because he'd retreat into the intricate worlds inside his own mind to escape the overwhelming chaos of the classroom. At home, his exhausted parents, grappling with a child they loved but could not understand, sometimes called him difficult. Their frustration, though born of love, was just more evidence for his internal prosecutor. He was defective. Every single day was a masterclass in social failure. Each taunt on the playground, each exasperated sigh from a teacher, each recess spent alone watching the other kids from afar, hammered the point home. The world was a complex game with a secret rulebook he'd never be given. The verdict was unanimous. He was wrong. So Randall made his own rules. Rule number 1: don't trust people. Their intentions are confusing, and the outcome is almost always pain. Rule number 2: hide the real you. Create a version they can tolerate, a mask of normalcy. This masking became a full-time, soul-crushingly exhausting job. Rule number 3: people always leave. Eventually, they will see the cracks in the mask and they will walk away. These weren't just thoughts, they were a survival manual. A manual that kept a little boy safe, but was now slowly poisoning the man he had become. Those rules, once a boy's shield, were now a man's cage. His wife, the one person he desperately wanted to let inside his fortress, was the very person his internal security system was designed to repel. Every interaction, no matter how benign, was filtered through the distorted, trauma-soaked lens of his past. When she would say with genuine affection, "You seem quiet tonight," Randall's brain didn't hear concern. It heard his third-grade teacher's sharp tone asking, "What's your problem today, Randall?" When she once suggested a spontaneous weekend trip to the coast, he didn't feel excitement. He felt a surge of pure panic. It was a deviation from the predictable routine that kept his world from spinning into chaos. His mind screamed, "It's a trap. She's testing you, trying to expose how poorly you handle change." It was as if they were speaking two completely different languages. She communicated with nuance, suggestion, and emotional shorthand, a neurotypical dialect he was never taught. Randall needed clear, direct, literal language. Anything less felt like a verbal minefield. So when she would say something indirect, like, "Wow, the trash is really full," his brain didn't process it as an observation. It processed it as a passive-aggressive jab at his failure to do a chore, and he felt the familiar, hot shame of the little boy being scolded for a rule he didn't know existed. And Randall saw what his reactions did to her. He watched the light in her eyes dim a little more each time he instinctively pulled away from a hug, his body flinching not because he didn't want her touch, but because the sudden, unplanned contact could feel like an electric shock to his system. She saw rejection. He saw her try to talk about her feelings, only to be met with his suffocating silence. Not because he was cold or uncaring, but because he was emotionally flooded, drowning in a storm of internal sensations he had no words for. She saw a withdrawn, unfeeling husband. He saw himself as a failure, fundamentally incapable of being the partner this vibrant, loving woman deserved. They were both trapped in a devastating cycle of misunderstanding, feeling profoundly alone, together. It finally shattered on a Tuesday. The trigger was something so small it was almost laughable. A carton of milk he had forgotten to buy on his way home from work. When his wife opened the refrigerator to make coffee and saw the empty spot where the milk should have been, her shoulders slumped with a weight far heavier than a single forgotten grocery item. This wasn't about the milk. It was about the 100 other little things just like it, a long chain of moments that made her feel invisible. "I just don't get it," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of raw frustration and deep sorrow. "It feels like you're not even here half the time, like you don't listen, like you don't trust me." That word, trust, was the key that blew the entire fortress apart. Instantly, his internal alarms screamed, "Deflect, deny, she's attacking you, protect yourself." And for a second, the old programming won. "It was just milk," he said, his voice sharp, defensive, and cold. "No, it's not about the milk," she cried, tears finally breaking free and streaming down her face. "It's that I can't reach you. I am out here screaming my love for you, and all I get back is a wall. What did I ever do to make you think I would hurt you? Why won't you let me in?" Her words, so full of raw, honest pain, accomplished what no attack ever could. They disarmed him completely. Seeing her hurt and knowing with sickening certainty that he was the cause, that pain was finally greater than any fear his past could dredge up. The dam of a lifetime broke. Because I'm broken. The words ripped out of his throat, raw and ragged. Okay? I'm broken. And every single day, I'm just waiting for you to see it, too. The confession hung in the air between them, both terrifying and liberating. He wasn't hiding anymore. The mask was gone, shattered on the kitchen floor. Randall stood there, exposed and shaking, having finally told the absolute truth. Not just about the milk, but about everything. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, but also filled with a fragile, new potential. She didn't run. She didn't yell or call him broken. She just looked at him, her anger melting away to reveal a deep, aching sadness and, beneath it, a flicker of dawning understanding. She crossed the room and, instead of overwhelming him with a hug, she simply took his hand. It was a small, safe connection, an anchor in the storm. That night, they talked for hours. For the first time, Randall didn't give one-word answers or retreat into silence. He told her about the playground, the names, the crushing loneliness. He spoke of the teachers, of feeling like a ghost in his own life. He explained the rules he had made to survive. He tried, clumsily, to put words to the storm, to explain how his brain processes things differently, that his suspicion wasn't a choice, but a deeply ingrained reflex burned into his neurology by years of pain. It was a disjointed, fragmented narrative, but it was real. And she listened. She truly listened. As she did, she began to see that his behaviors, the ones she had interpreted as being about her, were actually echoes of a past she'd never known. His rigid need for routine wasn't about controlling her. It was about feeling safe in a world that always felt chaotic. His silences weren't apathy. They were the result of being completely overwhelmed. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation. It was the first plank in a bridge between their two isolated islands. The next day, Randall sat at his computer. With a deep breath, he typed autism in adults into the search bar. It was the first step on an entirely new path, not toward a cure for who he was, but toward understanding himself. It was a journey toward learning a new set of rules, one they could finally write together. Now, when Randall hears his wife's key in the door, the old, fearful voice is still there. It's fainter now, a ghost in the machine. Here it comes, it whispers. But now, another voice answers it, quieter but steadier. It's the voice of awareness, of a hard-won peace. It reminds him, this isn't the playground. This isn't the classroom. This is your wife. This is your home. The fear hasn't vanished entirely. Trust still doesn't feel natural or easy. It is a conscious choice, an act of daily bravery. Sometimes Randall still feels his hands instinctively reaching for the bricks to build the wall back up. But now he is aware that he's the one holding the bricks. And she knows it too. She has learned to wait, to give him a moment of space, to ask for what she needs directly and clearly, and to not take his initial retreat as the final word. They are learning a new dance together. They still step on each other's toes from time to time, but the crucial difference is they never let go. If Randall's story hits home for you, if you've ever felt like you were living behind a wall you built yourself, share your story in the comments. Connection begins when we are brave enough to let ourselves be truly understood. For Randall, love isn't the absence of fear. It isn't a magical cure that erases old wounds. It is the quiet, steady choice to show up every single day, take a deep breath, and try to lay down one more brick from the wall. It's the slow, painstaking process of learning that safety isn't found in the lonely fortress of suspicion, but in the terrifying, beautiful, and life-changing risk of finally trusting the person who is holding your hand in the dark.
Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, it'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you. If you are in a neurodiverse marriage where one spouse is autistic and the other one is not, and you've been struggling for years and years, and you're kind of sick and tired of the routine, talk to me. Use me as your personal coach. I have groups, and I keep these groups small so that you can get a lot of one-on-one attention. I have 3 Q&A groups, one for ASD husbands, one for neurotypical wives, and I have a couples group where both spouses can attend. I also have 2 instructional groups, Cassandra Syndrome Recovery Group, to help you cultivate some strategies to recover from years of emotional deprivation, and the Men's Masterclass, in which we take a deep dive on developing social skills and emotional literacy in the context of the neurodiverse marriage. We meet 1 hour a week for 4 weeks. So how much longer are you willing to wait?